Aren't you doing training, have you?
Well, yes, I am in an hour. So yeah, I just wanted to stand up, All right, as a reminder, there is a document attached to this meeting, which has an attendees list and a agenda. So if you don't mind adding your name and anything you'd like to discuss to that document. All right, without further ado, I guess we can start off with the status updates. I'll kick us off here a little bit. We did release, what is it, pack 014.1. So we did have to do a patch release, and that had to do with a what is it, the log output of the lifecycle phases. Essentially, they were not coming out the way that we'd expect them to, since we changed the way that we were interfacing with the containers via the Docker API. We did get that resolved fairly quickly. I think it took us about 2 days to get it fully out there, but it didn't seem to have much of an impact. At least not a lot of users complained, so that was a good thing. Let's see, that's pretty much it. I could talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we're currently working on. I did make an update to the docs just recently, created a PR for the install instructions for Pack. I went ahead and compacted them into like tabs and stuff to make it easier to navigate and find the OS and the method of which you wanted to install Pack. So that PR is open. Aside from that, there were 2 broken delivery pipelines for Pack. One of them was the Docker, the Docker delivery pipeline, which was ultimately just not having some of the dependencies inside of the action any longer, based on the way that it functions. That got resolved internally, and I think I put an issue out there for David, since it's David's GitHub action that is currently being used, to be able to resolve that long term and just internalize the action for us to solve it in the short term. The other delivery pipeline that was broken was Arch Linux, where it was looking at picking up the checksum files instead of the actual binaries, the executables. So that one was relatively easy to do, and that's been resolved. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. Anybody else have any status updates?
I'm not sure if this falls under platform or implementation, so correct me if I'm off track here, but for the Windows build packages, we decided to, because NanoServer is going out of support, we decided to have the base image be kind of a minimal Windows Scratch image that Micah's making currently ourselves. So that'll be the base for Windows build packages. And kind of related to that, I think Andrew had put in a PR to clarify the distribution spec, I think is what he sent me. So we're still waiting on that, but no other updates besides that.
A question on the base image. So when we say Scratch, I have maybe 2 thoughts on the implementation. Is it that Pack itself is going to create an ephemeral Scratch image at some point, or is this going to be like a quote unquote Scratch image that lives somewhere? And if so, where?
I'm inclined to say the first one, but I will double check. I think the idea is that it would be procedurally created, but I haven't been working on that track, so I will ask Mike and get back to you all.
Sounds great. All right, any other status updates? Cool. Moving on. So release plan. Oh, sorry.
My machine is responding glacially today. I think I might have to do an old school, turn it off and turn it on again. So just a little update to the output format for Inspect Builder. I have put up a draft PR. It's failing at the moment because GoMock is making mocks which disagree with our metalinter, which is an interesting one. But it should be an end-to-end experience for just the existing human readable format and the JSON format. The YAML and TOML options still to be implemented, but it also represents a change to the library interface for Inspect Builder. The order type has changed in that, but pre-existing calls to it should work because the the depth field is via a variadic option. But it also represents a sort of refactor to how the command is put together and tested. So I appreciate some feedback. It looks quite big, but a lot of it is not sort of fundamental. It's just supporting stuff.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? All right. Moving on to release planning. Again, I'm not sure exactly what I haven't already covered as part of the status update, so I feel awkward as usual. Let's see. We haven't, at least I personally have not looked at creating a milestone for 0.15.0, or at least what specific items we'd want to put into that next release. I did put something into the agenda, which is the subcommands, and kind of discussing what our strategy for implementing such a large change should be. We could basically jump into that since I don't have anything else for the release planning. All right, so if I'm going to share my screen real quick. So if any of you are aware, there is this idea of changing the pack CLI to, instead of having these very long single top level commands, more or less break it down into individual subcommands or resource based subcommands. There was an RFC created for this, which was approved and merged in. That goes into a little bit more detail. If I could pull it up. All right, yeah, so this goes into a little bit more detail about how everything would work. We are going to keep some top level subcommands. Yeah, that's a weird way of saying it, but yeah, some top level subcommands that more or less now will work with multiple images. For instance, inspect. Instead of there being a inspect builder, inspect build pack, and so on, we are going to be looking at some of the labels, on the OCI image, and based on that, be able to infer what type it is. That seems like a issue or story of its own to kind of like break it out into. And aside from that, I think everything else kind of fits very well, with the exception of config. And config had probably the biggest point of contention throughout the RFC process. But nonetheless, I think once it got resolved, we now have a pretty good strategy. And once we implement it for one type of config resource, such as like lists, we should be able to apply that same logic to other list type resource config elements, right? Things that we're kind of talking about here are trusted builders versus registries, which is something that I believe Travis is actively working on. So I don't know. I just kind of want to open the floor and talk about how we could implement this in a reasonable manner, given that we do have a lot of concurrent work that could be impacting here, and we ultimately most likely are not going to want to break, users of pack at this moment, right? So we have to provide backwards compatibility for at least one minor version. Any comments, questions, concerns?
The list on that RFC seems to be a little different to the list as it currently appears in the issue. In a good way. I prefer what's in the RFC. So will we update the issue to reflect the content of the RFC?
I could definitely do that. I guess the way I was thinking about it, it's like historical presence, right? And the RFC taking precedence over what was in the original comment. But if it helps clarity, I could definitely update it.
So I think maybe we could keep the historical reference in a comment or something, but I would be concerned that someone could begin work on this issue and not think to reference the RFC. I think I would make the assumption that an issue that came out of an RFC would have the desired end state.
Yeah. I wonder if maybe the alternative, right, could be to close this issue and label it as something like RFC, required, and create a new issue, which is more or less an epic, very similar to Buildpacks registry, and then just kind of list out all the broken down individual issues where we could
Would work
see
for
the
me.
seams work. Yeah.
But yeah, I like what the RFC came up with when the issue kind of hid build behind an image parent command, and I was sort of like, oh, I'm not sure we want to not have pack build. That feels like dropping Heroku push or CF push or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, that was all, at length discussed. And there were going to be aliases and stuff like that. And we might do that in the future once we have more. Like, I think the biggest point of contention wasn't so much that we didn't want to hide it under like an image thing. It's that we didn't know what to name image. Like, we wanted to stay away from app, right? As well. So again, it might come again, but no matter what, there'll always be a top alias for pack build, which will build an application based on source. So you should be happy always. Sorry. Cool. All right. So does that sound like a good strategy? I know Travis, I know you're online. I don't know if you're busy, but I'm concerned about the conflict with some of the stuff that you're currently working on in this release.
Yeah, I mean, we can just coordinate as we go along. I'll have to look at it also in a little more detail. I've made some comments on the RFC in the past, but I haven't really revisited the topic since all the other changes that I made with the registry stuff. So I'll take a look and we can sync up and address any concerns.
Cool. Then yeah, I could definitely take the action item, as we mentioned, to just kind of break it out into individual issues and maybe circle back next week. Or actually, I'll be out next week. There's my announcement. So I'll circle back whenever we get back together again and kind of show off what we're going to be tackling in regards to this particular issue or epic. All right. Anything else on that? I don't believe there's anything else on the agenda. Anybody have anything else last minute? Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you guys next time.